The holographic display flickered above the war table, showing a three-dimensional map of the Kepler 442 system. Red indicators pulsed ominously around the fourth planet, marking the positions of the hegemony fleet. General Marcus Chen stared at the tactical readout, his weathered face grim as he processed the impossible numbers. 67 capital ships, Admiral Sarah Reeves said, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the command center. Each one the size of a city block. Their flagship alone carries enough firepower to glass an entire continent. The assembled officers shifted uncomfortably. Colonel James Morrison, head of the Marine Corps' most elite unit, cleared his throat. Sir, our intelligence suggests they've taken approximately 4,000 human civilians as prisoners. They're being held on the surface of Kepler 442 in what appears to be a mining operation. General Chen nodded slowly. The hegemony had been humanity's greatest threat for the past decade. These aliens viewed humans as nothing more than useful labor, capturing colonies and enslaving entire populations. This was their largest operation, yet and the civilians trapped on that distant world included families, children, scientists, and engineers who had been building humanity's newest frontier settlement. What are our assets? Chen asked, though he already knew the answer would be inadequate. Admiral Reeves pulled up another display. The carrier group Defiance is 3 days out, but that's still only 12 ships total. We have the advantage in fighter craft, but their defensive grid makes a direct assault suicide. Even if we somehow broke through, the bombardment would kill every civilian we're trying to save. The room fell silent again. Everyone present understood the mathematics of warfare, and these numbers simply didn't add up to victory. The hegemony had chosen their position well. Kepler 442d was surrounded by asteroid fields that provided natural cover for their defensive platforms. Any approaching fleet would be detected hours before reaching weapons range, giving the aliens time to position their forces and prepare devastating crossfire. What about a stealth insertion? Suggested Major Lisa Park from Special Operations Command. We could slip a small team through the asteroid field, maybe disable some of their sensors. Colonel Morrison shook his head. I've run the simulations. Even if we got a team to the surface, there's no way to extract 4,000 people without the hegemony noticing. And their ground forces outnumber anything we could deploy by 50 to 1. General Chen walked around the holographic display, studying it from every angle. He had been fighting wars for 30 years, had seen humanity triumph against impossible odds before, but this situation pushed beyond the boundaries of tactical possibility. The civilians had been taken 6 days ago. Every hour that passed meant more human lives lost to the hegemony's brutal labor camps. Sir, came a voice from the communications station. We're receiving a priority transmission from the outer system, encrypted military channel. Put it through, Chen ordered. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, professional, with a slight accent that suggested origins from one of the newer colonies. General Chen, this is Captain Elena Vasquez requesting permission to dock with your command vessel. I have information relevant to your current operation. Chen frowned. Captain Vasquez? I don't have any record of a Captain Vasquez in this sector. That's because I'm not officially part of this operation, sir. But I believe I can help with your Kepler 442 problem. Admiral Reeves leaned forward. Unknown vessel, state your identification and purpose immediately. There was a pause, then a sound that might have been quiet laughter. My identification is classified well above your clearance level, Admiral, but you can verify my credentials through General Chen's private command channel. As for my purpose, I'm here to make the impossible possible. Chen felt something stir in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Hope, perhaps, or maybe just curiosity. Captain, what's your ETA to our position? Approximately 30 minutes, sir. I'm flying something special. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in puzzled silence. General Chen turned to his communications officer. Run a full scan of our immediate vicinity. I want to know what's coming. Minutes passed before the officer looked up, confusion evident on his face. Sir, I'm not detecting any approaching vessels. Nothing on any frequency or sensor array. That's impossible, Admiral Reeves said. We heard the transmission. They have to be out there. Chen was about to respond when the proximity alarms began blaring. Every screen in the command center lit up with warnings as a contact suddenly appeared on their sensors, impossibly close to the fleet. The tactical display showed a single craft, moving with precision that defied conventional physics. How did it get so close without detection? Morrison demanded. Before anyone could answer, the view screen activated, showing the external camera feed. Against the backdrop of stars, a sleek aircraft approached their position. It was unlike anything in the standard military catalog, its hull seeming to bend light around its edges. The craft moved with an organic fluidity that made it appear almost alive. "General Chen," came Captain Vasquez's voice again, "requesting permission to come aboard." Chen stared at the impossible aircraft on his screen. In 30 years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something about this pilot, this mysterious arrival, felt significant. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was the recognition that conventional thinking had already failed them. "Permission granted, Captain. Dock in Bay 7. As the strange craft disappeared from view, heading toward their docking bay, Chen turned back to the tactical display showing the hegemony forces. 67 capital ships still surrounded Kepler 442. 4,000 human civilians still awaited rescue or death. The mission remained impossible by every measure of military logic, but for the first time in days, General Chen allowed himself to consider that perhaps military logic wasn't the only tool available to humanity. As he waited to meet this mysterious Captain Vasquez, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The docking bay fell silent as the sleek craft settled onto the deck with barely a whisper. General Chen stood with his senior staff behind the security barrier, watching as the ship's systems powered down. The vessel was even more unusual up close, its hull appearing to shift between different shades of gray and black, as if it were partially phased out of normal space. "I've never seen anything like it," Admiral Reeves murmured. "The energy signatures are completely unlike our standard propulsion systems." The craft's canopy opened with a soft hiss, and Captain Elena Vasquez emerged. She was younger than Chen had expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and piercing green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Her flight suit bore no standard military insignia, only a small patch that Chen didn't recognize. As she approached the security checkpoint, her movements were precise and confident, like someone accustomed to being the most capable person in any room. When the security scanner ran its check, the results made the technician frown and run the scan again. "Sir," the technician said quietly to General Chen, "her clearance level is showing as Omega Black. I've never seen that classification before." Chen's eyebrows rose. Omega Black was a clearance level that existed more in rumor than reality, supposedly reserved for projects so classified that their very existence was denied. He gestured for the security barrier to be lowered. Captain Vasquez stepped through and offered a crisp salute. "General Chen, thank you for seeing me. I apologize for the unconventional arrival, but time is critical." "Captain," Chen replied, returning the salute. "Before we go any further, I need to verify your credentials. Omega Black clearance is classified beyond your level, yes, sir," Vasquez interrupted politely. "But you can confirm my authorization through your personal command channel. Priority code 77 Alpha Whiskey." Chen stepped aside and activated his private communication terminal. The code Vasquez had given was one known only to a handful of people at the highest levels of military command. When he entered it, the response was immediate and surprising. Her credentials were not only valid, but came with a notation he had seen only twice before in his career. Full operational authority granted by Joint Command Directive. He turned back to face her, his expression now much more serious. "Captain Vasquez, what exactly is your connection to the Kepler 442 situation?" "I've been tracking the hegemony's movements for several months," she replied. "This operation isn't just about enslaving more humans. They're testing our response capabilities, measuring how we react to large-scale civilian hostage situations. If we fail here, if we can't rescue those people, it will encourage much larger operations against our core worlds." Colonel Morrison stepped forward. "That aligns with our intelligence assessments. But knowing why they're doing it doesn't solve the tactical problem. We still can't break through their defensive grid without massive casualties." Vasquez smiled, and for the first time since her arrival, she looked almost predatory. Colonel, you're thinking conventionally. The hegemony expects us to approach this like a traditional military operation. They've positioned their forces to counter exactly the kind of assault you would normally mount. And what would you suggest instead? Admiral Reeves asked skeptically. A single-ship infiltration mission using adaptive stealth technology, Vasquez replied without hesitation. My aircraft can penetrate their sensor networks undetected. I can reach the surface, assess the civilian situation, and create the conditions necessary for a successful extraction. The assembled officers exchanged glances. Major Park was the first to speak. Captain, even if your stealth capabilities are as advanced as you claim, you're talking about a solo mission against thousands of enemy troops. How could one person possibly? Because I'm not just one person, Vasquez interrupted. I'm a representative of humanity's true potential. The hegemony sees us as weak because they only observe our conventional military responses. They've never encountered what humans can accomplish when we stop limiting ourselves to traditional thinking. Chen studied her carefully. There was something in her tone, a confidence that went beyond mere bravado. Captain, what exactly is your background? Your service record shows gaps that are concerning. My service record is compartmentalized for operational security, she replied. But I can tell you that I've spent the last 5 years developing new approaches to asymmetric warfare. The hegemony believes they understand human tactics because they've studied our previous engagements. They're about to discover how wrong they are. Admiral Reeves crossed her arms. Even assuming your stealth technology works perfectly, how do you plan to extract 4,000 civilians? They're scattered across multiple mining facilities. Vasquez walked over to the tactical display that had been set up in the docking bay. She manipulated the holographic controls with familiar ease, zooming in on the planet's surface. The mining operations are connected by underground transport tunnels. The hegemony uses them to move materials and prisoners between facilities. If I can access the central transport hub, I can potentially gather the civilians in one location. That's a massive assumption, Morrison pointed out. And even if you could somehow accomplish that, how would you signal for extraction without alerting their fleet? I wouldn't signal for extraction, Vasquez said calmly. I would create a situation where the hegemony fleet has to choose between maintaining their defensive positions and responding to a crisis on the surface. In that moment of confusion, your carrier group could move in. Chen felt that stirring sensation again, the one he had experienced during her initial transmission. The plan she was outlining was audacious to the point of seeming impossible, but there was something about her certainty that made him want to believe it could work. Captain, he said slowly, you're asking us to commit our entire force based on your ability to single-handedly destabilize a fortified enemy position. The risk to our ships, to the civilians, to you personally. General, Vasquez interrupted, meeting his eyes directly. Yesterday you told your staff this mission was impossible. Nothing has changed about the tactical situation except my arrival. Either you trust that I represent something new, something the hegemony hasn't accounted for, or you accept that those 4,000 people are already dead. The docking bay fell silent again. Chen could feel the weight of command pressing down on him, the responsibility for thousands of lives hanging in the balance. Every instinct trained into him over 3 decades of military service said that Vasquez's plan was too risky, too dependent on variables outside their control. But another part of him, a part that had kept him alive through countless impossible situations, was telling him that sometimes the greatest risk was refusing to take any risk at all. What do you need from us? He asked finally. Vasquez's smile returned, and this time it was filled with genuine warmth. Just trust, General, and maybe a good distraction when the time comes. Humans have always been at their best when everyone else has counted us out. The briefing room buzzed with activity as Captain Vasquez connected her aircraft systems to the fleet's central computer. Streams of data flowed across multiple displays, showing technical specifications that made the gathered engineers and tacticians shake their heads in amazement. These power readings are impossible, Chief Engineer Rodriguez muttered, studying the energy output charts. The thrust-to-mass ratio alone defies our understanding of propulsion physics. Vasquez looked up from the control interface. Engineer Rodriguez, your understanding is based on conventional technology. What you're seeing is the result of 10 years of black project development. We've learned to stop asking what's possible and start asking what's necessary. General Chen leaned over the tactical display, watching as Vasquez overlaid her infiltration route onto the Kepler 442 system map. The path she had plotted seemed to thread impossibly through the hegemony sensor grid, taking advantage of asteroid shadows and electromagnetic interference from the system's twin stars. "How can you be certain your stealth field will hold?" Admiral Reeves asked. "The hegemony sensors are more advanced than anything we've encountered before." "Because my ship doesn't just hide from their sensors," Vasquez explained, manipulating the display to show wave propagation patterns. "It actively adapts to their scanning frequencies in real time. When they scan for metal signatures, the hull presents as rock. When they search for energy emissions, the field redistributes heat and electromagnetic output to match background radiation." Colonel Morrison studied the surface maps of Kepler 442d. Even if you reach the planet undetected, the ground-based challenges are enormous. Our intelligence shows at least 3,000 hegemony troops spread across the mining facilities. Vasquez pulled up a three-dimensional model of the planet's surface installations. The hegemony's greatest strength is also their weakness. They're incredibly organized, following rigid command structures and predictable protocols. They've positioned their forces to prevent a conventional rescue attempt, which means they've left gaps that a single operative can exploit. She highlighted several points on the map. "Here, here, and here. These are junction points in their communication network. If I can access them sequentially, I can introduce cascading failures in their coordination systems. While they're trying to re-establish command and control, I'll have a window to reach the central transport hub." Major Park, who had been quietly reviewing personnel files, looked up with concern. "Captain, you're talking about infiltrating 3 separate high-security facilities, each protected by hundreds of enemy soldiers. What's your extraction plan if something goes wrong?" "Major, you're still thinking conventionally," Vasquez replied with a slight smile. "The question isn't what happens if something goes wrong. The question is how to make sure that when things go wrong, they go wrong in our favor." She activated a new display showing the underground tunnel system. The hegemony uses the civilian workers to maintain these transport networks. They've created a single point of failure in their own system. If I can convince the humans to coordinate their actions with my infiltration, we can turn their entire infrastructure against them. Chen frowned. "You're asking untrained civilians to participate in what amounts to a military operation. These are families, scientists, engineers, not soldiers. General, with respect, you're underestimating them," Vasquez said firmly. "These people have been prisoners for 6 days. They've seen what the hegemony does to humans who resist, and they've also seen what happens to those who comply. By now they're ready to fight. They just need someone to show them how." Chief Engineer Rodriguez pulled up technical specifications for the A-10 aircraft visible in the docking bay. "Captain, I've been studying your ship's design. Some of these systems appear to be reverse-engineered from non-human technology. How did we acquire this capability?" Vasquez paused, choosing her words carefully. "Engineer, humanity has been preparing for threats like the hegemony longer than most people realize. Not all of our encounters with alien species have been hostile, and we've learned to adapt their technologies to serve human needs. My aircraft represents what happens when human ingenuity meets advanced alien engineering." Admiral Reeves looked skeptical. "And you're the only pilot qualified to operate such a system?" "I'm the only pilot assigned to this operation," Vasquez corrected. "The program that developed this technology has produced others, but they're deployed elsewhere, handling threats that haven't become public knowledge yet." The room fell quiet as the implications of her words sank in. General Chen realized that Captain Vasquez represented something far larger than a single experimental aircraft. She was a glimpse into humanity's hidden preparations for a universe that was more dangerous and complex than most people knew. "What do you need from the fleet?" Chen asked. Vasquez manipulated the tactical display, showing the positions of the carrier group. "I need your ships to begin moving toward the outer edge of the asteroid field, exactly 18 hours after I begin my infiltration. Not before, because that will alert their sensors too early. Not after, because I'll need the distraction at precisely the right moment." "What kind of distraction?" Morrison asked. "The kind that makes the hegemony admiral believe he's facing a full fleet assault," Vasquez replied. "I need every ship broadcasting false signatures, launching decoy drones, and creating enough electromagnetic noise to convince them that humanity has committed everything to this rescue operation." while you're actually on the surface dismantling their infrastructure from within, Chen said, beginning to understand the plan's elegance. Exactly. The hegemony will have to choose between maintaining their orbital blockade and reinforcing their ground positions. Either choice creates opportunities for the civilians to escape and for your fleet to exploit tactical advantages. Chief Engineer Rodriguez shook his head in admiration. It's psychological warfare on a strategic scale. You're not just attacking their military capabilities, you're attacking their decision-making process itself. Vasquez nodded. Humans excel at adaptive thinking under pressure. The hegemony follows established protocols. When those protocols start failing simultaneously across multiple fronts, their response time will slow just enough to give us the edge we need. General Chen walked around the display, studying the plan from every angle. It was still audacious, still dependent on variables beyond their direct control, but he could see how it might work. More importantly, he could see that it represented a fundamentally different approach to warfare, one that played to humanity's unique strengths, rather than trying to match alien capabilities directly. Captain, he said finally, when do you want to begin? Vasquez checked the chronometer on her wrist. In 6 hours, General. The hegemony's shift rotation patterns show a 15-minute gap in their sensor coverage during their night cycle. That's my window to penetrate their outer defenses. 6 hours, Chen repeated. That's not much time to coordinate the fleet movements. It's enough time, sir, Admiral Reeves said, her earlier skepticism replaced by determined focus. If Captain Vasquez can do what she's promising, we'll be ready. As the briefing dispersed, Chen found himself alone with Vasquez for a moment. Captain, can I ask you something off the record? Of course, General. How many operations like this have you conducted? Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. General, this is only the second time I've had to reveal myself and my capabilities to conventional military command. The first time was when the hegemony wiped out the colony at Ross 128. We saved 800 people that day, but we were too late to save 3,000 others. Chen understood. That's why this matters so much to you. This matters because it's going to determine whether humanity remains reactive to alien threats or becomes proactive in defending our people, Vasquez replied. Those 4,000 civilians represent more than just human lives. They represent our commitment to never leaving anyone behind, no matter how impossible the rescue seems. As she walked away to make final preparations, General Chen felt that stirring sensation again. This time he recognized it for what it was, pride in what humanity could accomplish when it refused to accept defeat. The modified A-10 slipped through space like a shadow, its adaptive hull shifting patterns to match the cosmic background radiation. Captain Elena Vasquez monitored the sensor displays as she navigated between the asteroids, each movement calculated to keep her hidden from the hegemony's detection grid. Phase 1 initiated, she whispered into her communication array, knowing that General Chen and his staff were watching her progress from 18 light minutes away. Beginning approach to primary sensor station. The first target was a hegemony monitoring post built into a large asteroid, its metal framework bristling with sensor arrays that scanned constantly for approaching threats. Vasquez had studied the installation's design for hours, memorizing every detail of its defensive systems and crew rotations. As she drew closer, her ship's advanced systems began their work. The adaptive camouflage analyzed the asteroid's mineral composition and adjusted the hull's appearance to match perfectly. To any scanner, her ship would appear to be nothing more than a piece of drifting rock, indistinguishable from the thousands of other fragments floating in the field. Vasquez brought her craft to within 50 meters of the monitoring post before activating the infiltration protocol. A specialized probe, no larger than a coffee cup, detached from her ship and drifted toward the station's communication array. The probe carried a sophisticated computer virus designed specifically for hegemony systems, one that would create subtle malfunctions rather than obvious failures. Contact made with primary target, she reported. Virus deployment successful. On the monitoring station, hegemony technicians continued their routine scans, unaware that their systems were now reporting false data. The virus worked slowly, introducing tiny delays and minor calibration errors that would accumulate over time. By itself, the sabotage would be undetectable. Combined with similar attacks on other stations, It would create gaps in their sensor coverage large enough for a human to exploit. Vasquez moved to the second target, another monitoring post positioned to cover a different approach vector to the planet. This time she encountered her first real challenge. A hegemony patrol craft was docked at the station, its crew conducting a routine inspection of the facility's systems. She held position for 30 minutes, watching the aliens work. The hegemony soldiers moved with mechanical precision, following protocols that had clearly been drilled into them through countless repetitions. Their efficiency was impressive, but it also made them predictable. When they finished their inspection and departed, they followed exactly the route that their tactical doctrine specified. Second virus deployed, Vasquez reported, moving to final sensor target. The third monitoring post presented a different problem entirely. Its position left no obvious approach route that wouldn't expose her to detection from multiple angles. But Vasquez had anticipated this challenge and prepared accordingly. She activated a secondary system in her ship, one that the engineers back at the fleet would have found even more impossible than her stealth technology. The space around her craft began to ripple, and suddenly there were 3 identical ships where there had been one before. The holographic duplicates moved with perfect synchronization, each one taking a different approach to the monitoring post. The hegemony sensors detected the movement, but their analysis systems couldn't determine which contact was real. By the time they had initiated a response protocol, all 3 ships had vanished into the asteroid field. Final sensor station compromised, Vasquez reported, beginning atmospheric entry. The planet below was a harsh world of red stone and thin air, its surface scarred by extensive mining operations. Hegemony ships moved in regular patrols between the orbital platforms and the surface installations, following traffic patterns that had been optimized for efficiency rather than security. Vasquez's ship slipped into the planetary atmosphere disguised as a piece of orbital debris, its hull heated to match the thermal signature of falling metal. The descent was carefully controlled to avoid creating the kind of atmospheric disturbance that would trigger automatic defense systems. As she approached the surface, Vasquez could see the mining facilities scattered across the landscape like metallic wounds in the planet's flesh. Each installation was surrounded by defensive barriers and guard towers, designed to keep the human prisoners contained while they worked to extract valuable minerals for the hegemony war machine. Her first destination was Communications Hub Delta, a facility that coordinated data flow between all the mining operations. If she could access its central computer, she could map the exact locations of every human prisoner and begin coordinating their actions. The landing was executed with surgical precision, touching down in a canyon 3 kilometers from the hub. Vasquez powered down her ship's active systems and activated its final layer of camouflage, a field that made the craft appear to be nothing more than an unusual rock formation. She checked her equipment one last time before leaving the cockpit. Her suit was designed for extended operations in hostile environments, equipped with adaptive camouflage that matched her ship's capabilities. Her weapons were compact but highly advanced, using technology that could disable hegemony equipment without creating the energy signatures that would alert their sensors. The approach to Communications Hub Delta took 2 hours of careful movement through terrain that offered minimal cover. Vasquez used every feature of the landscape to mask her advance, timing her movements to coincide with the patrol schedules she had memorized during the briefing. The hub's perimeter was guarded by automated systems and a small contingent of hegemony soldiers. Vasquez observed their patterns for 20 minutes before making her move. The guards followed their assigned routes with the same mechanical precision she had observed at the orbital stations, never deviating from the predetermined schedule. When the patrol passed her position, Vasquez moved. She crossed the open ground in a low sprint, reaching the facility's outer wall just as the next guard rotation began. Her suit's camouflage adjusted to match the metal surface, making her virtually invisible against the structure. The infiltration itself was a masterpiece of human adaptability. Where hegemony security relied on technological barriers and predictable procedures, Vasquez used creativity and improvisation. She found a ventilation intake that hadn't been included in the facility's security grid and used it to access the building's interior. Inside the communications hub, she encountered something that filled her with both rage and determination. Through an observation window, She could see a group of human prisoners working to maintain the facility's computer systems. They moved slowly, showing signs of malnutrition and exhaustion, but their eyes still held the spark of intelligence that the hegemony had tried so hard to extinguish. One of the prisoners was a young girl, no more than 12 years old, who was helping an older man repair a damaged circuit board. Despite everything they had endured, the humans were still taking care of each other, still using their skills to survive in an environment designed to break their spirit. Vasquez felt her resolve harden. These people deserved better than to be tools in an alien war machine. They deserved to go home, to rebuild their lives, to show the universe that humanity could not be conquered by force or intimidation. She accessed the central computer terminal and began uploading the coordination virus she had prepared. This one was different from the sensor station infiltrations. It was designed to create a communication network that the human prisoners could use to coordinate their own actions. Phase 1 complete, she whispered into her comm unit. Beginning prisoner contact protocol. All stations prepare for Phase 2 initiation. As the virus spread through the hegemony's communication network, Vasquez prepared to make contact with the people she had come to save. Soon they would learn that they were not alone, and that humanity had not abandoned them to their fate. The first sign that something had gone wrong came through the hijacked communication system as an urgent whisper from Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist who had been captured during the initial hegemony assault on the colony. Unknown contact. This is Dr. Chen at Mining Facility 7. We received your signal, but there's a problem. The hegemony brought in a new commander 3 hours ago, something called a strategic adaptation protocol. They're changing all their procedures. Captain Vasquez felt her heart skip a beat. The strategic adaptation protocol was something the intelligence community had theorized about but never confirmed. It suggested that the hegemony had learned to recognize when humans were attempting unconventional tactics and had developed countermeasures. Dr. Chen, can you describe what changes you're observing? Vasquez whispered back through the concealed communication channel. Random patrol schedules, altered guard rotations, and they've started separating the technical specialists from the general population. They're also conducting surprise equipment inspections every 30 minutes instead of following their normal routine. Vasquez processed this information rapidly. Her entire infiltration plan had been based on the hegemony's predictable behavior patterns. If they were actively adapting their security protocols, it meant they either suspected sabotage or had detected some evidence of her presence. All human contacts maintain normal behavior patterns, she transmitted. Do not deviate from expected prisoner conduct until you receive specific instructions. She moved through the communications facility's corridors with even greater caution, knowing that the margin for error had just become much smaller. As she reached the central data core, her worst fears were confirmed. A hegemony officer she hadn't seen before was reviewing security footage on a bank of monitors, examining recordings from the past several hours. The alien was different from the standard hegemony soldiers she had observed. Its posture suggested higher intelligence and authority, and its equipment included sensors she didn't recognize. This was clearly the strategic adaptation specialist that Dr. Chen had mentioned. Vasquez watched from the shadows as the officer systematically analyzed footage from around the facility. Its movements were methodical but not mechanical. This alien was thinking, reasoning, trying to identify patterns that might indicate infiltration. When the officer's attention focused on a corridor near her infiltration point, Vasquez realized that her time was running out. The alien had spotted something anomalous, a tiny detail that conventional security would have missed. But that marked her passage through the facility. She made a decision that went against every instinct of a covert operative. Instead of trying to remain hidden, she stepped into the open and activated her suit's combat protocols. The hegemony officer reacted with surprising speed, reaching for a communication device to alert the facility's guards. Vasquez moved faster, using a localized electromagnetic pulse to disable the alien's equipment before it could transmit. The officer drew a weapon, but Vasquez was already inside its effective range. The fight was brief but intense. The hegemony officer was stronger and had longer reach, but Vasquez had trained for exactly this kind of close-quarters encounter. She used the alien's size against it, staying mobile and targeting weak points that human intelligence had identified through careful study of hegemony physiology. When the officer fell unconscious, Vasquez quickly accessed the central computer system. What she found there made her blood run cold. The hegemony wasn't just adapting their security, they were accelerating their timeline. New orders had been transmitted to all facilities. The human prisoners were to be relocated to the orbital platforms within 6 hours for transport to a high-security facility in another star system. "This is Vasquez to all human contacts," she transmitted urgently. "The situation has changed. Evacuation timeline moved up to 6 hours. We need to implement emergency protocols immediately." The response from Dr. Chen came back quickly. "Understood. We've identified key personnel at each facility who can coordinate resistance actions. But there's another problem. They've activated automated defense systems that we didn't know existed. Energy barriers around all the mining facilities that can't be disabled remotely." Vasquez felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. Every mission plan had contingencies. But this situation was pushing beyond the boundaries of what any single operative could handle. The hegemony's adaptation was more sophisticated than anyone had anticipated, but as she considered the problem, she realized that the hegemony's greatest strength might also be their vulnerability. They were adapting to human tactics, but they were still thinking like hegemony. They expected resistance to follow logical patterns and organized structures. "Dr. Chen, relay this message to all facilities," Vasquez transmitted. "In exactly 30 minutes, every human prisoner needs to do something completely irrational. I don't care what it is. Sing songs, perform mathematics exercises, tell jokes to the guards. The more illogical and unpredictable, the better." "I don't understand," came the confused reply. "The hegemony's strategic adaptation systems are designed to counter logical human behavior," Vasquez explained as she made her way toward the facility's main power distribution center. "But they can't adapt to pure chaos. If every human starts acting completely unpredictably at the same time, their response protocols will be overwhelmed." As she reached the power center, Vasquez began implementing the most dangerous part of her revised plan. Instead of the subtle sabotage she had originally intended, she was going to create a cascading system failure that would force the hegemony to choose between maintaining orbital security and responding to surface emergencies. The power distribution center was more heavily guarded than the communications hub, but the guards were now operating under the new adaptive protocols. Their unpredictable patrol patterns actually worked in Vasquez's favor, creating opportunities that wouldn't have existed under the original rigid schedule, and she accessed the power grid's control systems and began uploading a specialized virus designed to create random equipment failures throughout the mining complex. But instead of the gradual degradation she had planned, she set the virus to activate everything simultaneously in 30 minutes, exactly when the human prisoners would begin their campaign of deliberate irrationality. "Warning. To all human contacts," she transmitted, "in 30 minutes there will be multiple system failures throughout all facilities. Use the confusion to move toward the central transport hub. Stay together, help each other, and remember that chaos is our friend." As she prepared to leave the power center, Vasquez heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Multiple guards were converging on her position, having detected some trace of her presence. The adaptive security protocols were working better than she had hoped they wouldn't. But instead of trying to avoid the confrontation, Vasquez made another counterintuitive decision. She activated her suit's emergency beacon, broadcasting her location to every hegemony sensor in the facility. The signal screamed across all communication frequencies, impossible to ignore or miss. The guards rushed toward her position, abandoning their posts throughout the facility as they responded to what appeared to be a major security breach. As they converged on the power center, Vasquez was already moving, using their own response against them by slipping past their abandoned positions. "Beacon activated," she transmitted to the fleet. "General Chen, begin your approach now. The hegemony will detect it in approximately 15 minutes, which will force them to divide their attention between orbital defense and surface security." She could imagine the chaos beginning to unfold in the hegemony command structure. Their orbital forces would be preparing for a fleet engagement, while their ground commanders dealt with simultaneous equipment failures and apparently irrational prisoner behavior. The strategic adaptation protocols that were supposed to make them more effective were instead creating decision paralysis as they tried to counter too many variables at once. As Vasquez made her way toward the transport hub. She reflected on what made humans different from other species. It wasn't just their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to embrace chaos when necessary, to find opportunity in confusion, and to adapt not just their strategies but their entire approach to problem solving. The hegemony had made the mistake of trying to counter human logic with alien logic. They were about to discover that humans' greatest strength wasn't their rationality. It was their willingness to abandon rationality entirely when the situation demanded it. The central transport hub erupted into controlled chaos as Captain Vasquez's virus activated across all systems simultaneously. Emergency lights bathed the underground facility in red illumination, while automated warnings blared in the hegemony's harsh language. Throughout the mining complex, equipment failures cascaded from one system to another, creating exactly the kind of confusion that humans could exploit. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the main assembly area of Mining Facility 7, watching as her fellow prisoners began their campaign of deliberate irrationality. Professor Martinez, a mathematics expert from the colony's university, had convinced a group of children to recite pi to 100 decimal places while marching in formation. Engineer Williams was teaching a hegemony guard how to fold paper airplanes, speaking earnestly about aerodynamic principles while the confused alien tried to understand why a prisoner would share technical knowledge. "It's working," Dr. Chen whispered into the communication device hidden in her sleeve. "The guards don't know how to respond to behavior that serves no apparent purpose." 3 kilometers below the surface, Vasquez reached the transport hub's main terminal, just as the first groups of human prisoners began arriving through the tunnel system. The sight of nearly 400 people moving through the underground corridors with purposeful determination filled her with pride. Despite 6 days of captivity, despite malnutrition and exhaustion, they had organized themselves into efficient teams that could adapt to rapidly changing circumstances. "Dr. Chen, report on prisoner status," Vasquez called through the communication network. "We have accountability for 3,827 people," came the reply. The hegemony separated some of the technical specialists, but Engineer Co managed to disable the security locks on their detention areas during the confusion. Vasquez smiled as she accessed the transport hub's central computer. Engineer Co had been captured during the initial assault while trying to protect the colony's data archives. The fact that he had found a way to free the other specialists demonstrated exactly the kind of human ingenuity that the hegemony consistently underestimated. Above ground, the situation was developing exactly as Vasquez had hoped. General Chen's fleet had been detected approaching the outer edge of the asteroid field, forcing the hegemony orbital commander to choose between maintaining defensive positions and responding to the surface emergencies. The alien admiral had opted to split his forces, sending half his ships to intercept the approaching human fleet while keeping the remainder in orbital defense positions. But General Chen had anticipated this response. The approaching ships were projecting false signatures that made them appear to be a much larger force than they actually were. When the hegemony interceptor fleet reached weapons range, they discovered they were engaging a mix of real vessels and sophisticated decoys that had been designed to waste their ammunition and divide their attention. "Admiral Reeves to all ships," came the transmission. Through the fleet communication network, "The hegemony has taken the bait. Begin Phase 2 of the deception protocol." On the planet's surface, the mining facilities descended into complete chaos as the human prisoners abandoned all pretense of cooperation. Instead of fighting the guards directly, they implemented strategies that were far more psychologically devastating. Teams of children asked the alien soldiers endless questions about their families and homeworlds. Scientists offered to help improve hegemony technology, while subtly introducing flaws that would cause failures later. Maintenance workers fixed equipment in ways that made it work better temporarily but ensured catastrophic breakdowns within hours. The hegemony's strategic adaptation protocol was designed to counter logical human resistance, but it had no framework for dealing with resistance that was simultaneously helpful and harmful, cooperative and subversive. Their response algorithms began generating contradictory orders as they tried to process behavior that defied their understanding of rational prisoner conduct. In the transport hub, Vasquez watched as the final groups of prisoners made their way through the tunnel system. The evacuation was proceeding faster than she had dared hope, but she knew the most dangerous phase was still ahead. Getting 4,000 people off the planet would require transportation that the hegemony could track and intercept. General Chen, this is Vasquez, she transmitted. Prisoner evacuation to Central Hub is 95% complete. Ready to implement final phase. Understood, Captain. Fleet is in position. What do you need from us? Vasquez took a deep breath before responding. The next part of her plan was the most audacious yet, requiring precise timing and absolute trust between the surface operation and the orbital fleet. General, I need you to convince the hegemony that you're beginning a full-scale planetary invasion. Launch every fighter you have, broadcast invasion protocols on all frequencies, and make it look like you're preparing to commit ground forces. There was a pause before General Chen's voice came back. Captain, that will expose our entire fleet to their remaining orbital platforms. If they concentrate their fire, they won't, Vasquez interrupted. Because while they're focused on your fleet, I'm going to give them a much bigger problem to worry about. She activated the transport hub's emergency systems, but instead of using them for evacuation, she reprogrammed them for something the hegemony would never expect. The underground transport network that connected all the mining facilities was about to become the delivery system for the largest coordinated infrastructure failure in the planet's history. All human contacts. Implement final protocol, she transmitted. In 60 seconds, every technical specialist needs to trigger simultaneous failures in all critical systems. Power grids, life support, communication networks, mining equipment. Everything goes offline at exactly the same moment. Dr. Chen's voice came back immediately. That will trap the hegemony forces in their own facilities. But it will also trap us. Not if we're already gone, Vasquez replied, activating the transport system's evacuation mode. I'm bringing the entire network online for mass transit. Every human prisoner gets on the next transport and rides to the hub. The journey takes 12 minutes, which gives us exactly enough time to reach the surface before the infrastructure collapses. As she spoke, Vasquez was uploading the final virus into the planetary computer network. This one was different from all the others. It was designed to turn the hegemony's own automation systems against them. Mining robots would begin excavating critical support structures. Environmental systems would shut down in sequence, creating emergency situations that required immediate attention. Security networks would lock down their own personnel in protective bunkers that would become prisons. The evacuation began with the efficiency that only desperate humans could achieve. Families helped elderly prisoners onto the transport platforms, while engineers and scientists worked frantically to ensure the system could handle the unprecedented load. Children who had been asking endless questions now followed instructions with military precision, understanding instinctively that their survival depended on everyone working together. Transport system at maximum capacity, reported Engineer Ko from his position at the control station. All platforms are loaded and moving toward Central Hub. Above ground, General Chen's fleet was engaged in the most complex deception operation in human military history. Every ship was broadcasting false signatures while launching decoys and electronic warfare packages designed to convince the hegemony that humanity had committed every available resource to this rescue mission. The alien fleet was responding exactly as predicted, concentrating their forces to counter what appeared to be an overwhelming assault. But the real breakthrough came when the planetary infrastructure began failing in cascade patterns that the hegemony's automated systems couldn't handle. Mining facilities that had operated for years suddenly found themselves without power, air circulation, or communication networks. Emergency protocols activated simultaneously across dozens of installations, creating crisis situations that required immediate response from ground forces that were already dealing with irrational prisoner behavior. The hegemony orbital commander faced a choice that no military doctrine had prepared him for: continue engaging the human fleet, or divert resources to prevent total collapse of the surface operations. Either decision would compromise his ability to prevent the prisoners from escaping. As the first transport arrived at the Central Hub, Vasquez felt a surge of satisfaction that went beyond professional accomplishment. 400 humans disembarked with the kind of calm efficiency that spoke to their species' ability to function under extreme pressure. They immediately began helping to organize the arrival areas for the subsequent transports, turning what could have been chaos into a coordinated evacuation effort. "This is Dr. Chen," came the transmission from the final facility. "Last transport loaded and departing. All human personnel accounted for. Vasquez checked her chronometer. The timing was perfect. In exactly 8 minutes, General Chen's fleet would begin its withdrawal, drawing the hegemony forces away from the planet. In 10 minutes, her ship's automated systems would activate and begin broadcasting her extraction beacon. In 12 minutes, the OV infrastructure. The extraction zone was a carefully orchestrated symphony of human cooperation. 4,027 rescued prisoners moved with the disciplined efficiency of people who understood that their freedom depended on everyone working together. Families stayed close but didn't cluster. Technical specialists helped coordinate the evacuation flow, and children followed instructions with a maturity that spoke to their species' remarkable adaptability. Captain Elena Vasquez stood at the command station in the transport hub, watching as her ship's automated systems responded to the extraction beacon. Through the hub's viewing ports, she could see her modified A-10 rising from its camouflaged position in the distant canyon, its hull shimmering as it approached at maximum speed. "General Chen, this is Vasquez," she transmitted to the fleet. "All personnel accounted for and ready for extraction. Planetary infrastructure collapse proceeding as planned." "Understood, Captain," came the reply. "The hegemony fleet is moving to intercept us, but Admiral Reeves has a surprise waiting for them." "How long do you need for evacuation?" Vasquez calculated quickly. Her ship could carry perhaps 50 people in an emergency configuration, but 4,000 required a different solution entirely. Fortunately, she had prepared for this contingency. "General, I need exactly 18 minutes. My ship is configured with expanded transport capability, but the loading process requires precision timing." As her aircraft settled onto the hub's main platform, Vasquez activated systems that the fleet engineers would have found even more remarkable than her stealth technology. The ship's interior began expanding, its internal dimensions increasing through spatial manipulation technology that humanity had adapted from a species that no longer existed. Dr. Sarah. Chen watched in amazement as the aircraft's cargo bay opened to reveal a space that was clearly larger than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed. "Captain, how is this possible?" "Dr. Chen, humanity has encountered many civilizations over the past decade," Vasquez replied as she guided the loading process. "Some were hostile, some were indifferent, but a few were willing to share knowledge with a species they considered promising. This technology represents what happens when human engineering meets alien physics." The evacuation proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Engineer Ko had organized the technical specialists into teams that helped coordinate the flow of people into the aircraft. Professor Martinez worked with the children to keep them calm and focused. Families helped elderly prisoners navigate the unfamiliar technology. Every person contributed to the collective effort, demonstrating the cooperative instincts that made humanity unique among the known spacefaring civilizations. Meanwhile, the planetary infrastructure continued its programmed collapse. Mining facilities lost power in cascade failures that left hegemony forces trapped in their own defensive positions. Communication networks fragmented as each installation's emergency protocols conflicted with centralized command structures. Automated systems designed to protect the facilities instead created lockdown situations that prevented effective response to the surface crisis. In orbit above Kepler 442, the hegemony fleet faced its own version of impossible choices. Admiral Reeves had implemented the most sophisticated deception operation in human military history, using false signatures and decoy drones to make the hegemony admiral believe he was facing a force 3 times larger than the actual human fleet. But the real masterstroke came when the human ships began broadcasting surrender, messages on multiple frequencies while simultaneously launching what appeared to be a full-scale assault. The contradictory signals created confusion in the hegemony command structure as they tried to determine whether the humans were surrendering or attacking. "This is Admiral Reeves to all ships," came the transmission. "The hegemony is trying to adapt to our tactics, so we're giving them too many variables to process simultaneously. Every ship will broadcast different intentions while executing the same maneuver. Confuse their decision-making algorithms while maintaining tactical advantage." The strategy worked perfectly. The hegemony fleet found itself responding to multiple perceived threats while trying to process contradictory information about human intentions. Their tactical computers generated conflicting recommendations as they attempted to counter strategies that appeared to be simultaneously aggressive and defensive, coordinated and chaotic, On the planet's surface, Vasquez watched as the final groups of prisoners boarded her ship. The loading process was nearly complete, but she knew the most dangerous phase was still ahead. Getting clear of the planet's gravity well while avoiding the orbital battle would require precise navigation and perfect timing. "Captain," came Engineer Ko's voice from the cargo bay. "All personnel are aboard and secured. Internal systems show full life support for extended voyage." Vasquez nodded and sealed the aircraft's expanded cargo compartment. The ship now carried more than 4,000 people in a space that conventional physics said shouldn't exist. But as she had learned over the past 5 years, conventional physics was just humanity's starting point, not their limitation. "General Chen, this is Vasquez. Beginning ascent now. All prisoners aboard and secured." The modified A-10 lifted off from the transport hub with surprising smoothness, its enhanced propulsion systems compensating for the massive passenger load. As they rose through the planet's atmosphere, Vasquez could see the mining facilities below, their lights flickering as the infrastructure collapse reached its final stages. The hegemony had invested years of effort and enormous resources in developing Kepler 442d as a strategic mining operation. In the span of 6 hours, humanity had not only rescued every captured civilian, but it also rendered the entire planetary installation useless for future operations. But more importantly, they had demonstrated something that would resonate throughout the galaxy. When humans were pushed to their limits, when conventional tactics failed and the situation seemed impossible, they found ways to succeed that no other species had ever imagined. As they reached orbit, Vasquez could see the space battle unfolding around them. The human fleet was executing a fighting withdrawal that drew the hegemony forces away from the planet while maintaining the deception that they were a much larger force. The alien ships pursued with the mechanical precision that characterized their species, following tactical doctrines that prioritized efficiency over adaptability. "This is General Chen to all evacuation personnel," came the transmission. "Well done." Jump coordinates transmitted. "We'll rendezvous at the designated rally point in 36 hours. Vasquez activated her ship's jump drive, feeling the familiar sensation of space folding around them as they entered hyperspace. In the cargo bay, 4,000 human prisoners were beginning their journey home, carried by technology that represented the best of what their species could accomplish when they refused to accept limitations. 3 days later, aboard the fleet flagship, General Chen stood before the assembled rescued civilians in the main assembly hall. The room was filled with families that had been reunited, scientists eager to return to their research, engineers already planning improvements to the colony they would rebuild. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "what happened at Kepler 442 will be remembered as more than just a successful rescue operation. It represents a fundamental shift in how humanity approaches seemingly impossible challenges." He gestured toward Captain Vasquez, who stood at the back of the hall, still wearing her flight suit. "Captain Vasquez demonstrated that our greatest strength isn't our technology or our tactics. It's our refusal to accept that any problem is truly unsolvable when humans work together." Dr. Chen raised her hand from the audience. "General, what happens now?" "The hegemony will adapt their strategies based on what they learned from this operation." "You're absolutely right, Dr. Chen," the general replied with a smile. "They will adapt. They'll develop new countermeasures for our tactics, create better security protocols, and implement more sophisticated strategic algorithms." He paused, looking around the room at the faces of people who had survived the impossible and come home. "But here's what they don't understand about humanity. We adapt faster. Every time they create a new challenge, we find a new solution. Every time they think they've limited our options, we discover capabilities they didn't know we possessed." Captain Vasquez stepped forward slightly. "General, if I may add something." "Of course." "Captain, the hegemony made a fundamental error in their assessment of human psychology," she said, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had proven the impossible possible. "They assumed that humans would become demoralized when faced with overwhelming odds. Instead, impossible situations tend to bring out our best qualities: creativity, cooperation, and absolute determination to protect our people." She looked around the room at the civilians she had helped rescue. What happened at Kepler 442 wasn't about superior technology or brilliant tactics. It was about 4,000 people who refused to stay prisoners, a fleet crew that refused to abandon them, and a species that refuses to accept defeat when our families are at stake. The applause that followed was quiet but sustained, the kind of recognition that acknowledged not just success but the revelation